Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Dynow's Lunch and Learn. This is our second Lunch and Learn so far in the month of May, and we're excited to have you all join us today. For those of you who have not attended a Lunch and Learn event before, these are short form events where we highlight a feature or use case of Dyknow. Today, we'll be diving into Dyknow analytics capabilities and talk a little bit about class history within Dyknow classroom management and device impact measurement for tech coaches and admins to get analytics and data at the school and district level. If you're interested in getting the recording after this, we'll be sending the recording to everyone who is attending live and everyone who registered prior to the event if you're unable to join us live. And we'll also follow up with some great content that we're taking from this presentation to help you really level up the analytics that you're getting from Dyknow and using those. If you're a current Dyknow user, this will all apply to your use of Dyknow and help you level up your usage. And if you are not a current Dyknow user, we would love to help you get started with Dyknow after the event if you're looking for a classroom management device monitoring solution and to get that complete device usage data for your school and your district. So for those of you who are not familiar with Dyknow, Dyknow is a monitoring solution for school issued devices in the K-12 industry. So we serve two purposes. The first is our classroom management module that is for teachers to do real-time monitoring in the classroom to get real-time visibility of student devices and defeat distractions before they happen so that students are on task and learning effectively. Recently, at the beginning of 2021, we released our device impact measurement module, which is complementary to classroom management and enables admins and tech coaches to passively collect that device usage data and really understand at the district and school level how devices and technology tools are being used so that they can inform district investment decisions and evaluate what's being used, what's not being used, and you really get that full picture. So today you will be hearing from myself for this introduction, and I'll be facilitating our Q&A. And you'll be hearing primarily from Casey Higgs, who is Dyknow's School Success Director. Before I pass it off to Casey, I want to remind everyone, if you have any questions throughout this presentation, feel free to throw them in the Zoom Q&A tool, and we'll be monitoring that. And we'll allocate some time at the end of this to answer all of your questions. And without further ado, I'll pass it off to Casey to jump into talking about Dyknow analytics.
Thank you, Tierra, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. So I've been with Dyknow about 4 years, and I manage the school success team, which focuses on onboarding, training, and supporting Dyknow customers. And every time I train teachers that are new to Dyknow, I talk about data and how important it is and how helpful the analytics that we offer can be. Well, now, as Tierra mentioned, we've got an entirely new offering specific for tech coaches and admins. So that's definitely what we're going to dig into today. As I mentioned, I tell teachers how important this stuff is. Well, it's important for tech coaches and admins too. Data on student device usage is more important than ever for K-12 educators because there's simply more student device usage than ever. The use of all that technology in the classroom is distracting for students, and it complicates things for teachers, many of whom probably don't feel comfortable or confident with technology anyway. So with remote learning, this is even worse now, right? Or it can be. With teachers not physically in the same place as their students, they certainly can't see what their students are doing on those devices. And again, that lack of confidence and trust in technology results in poor usage of devices and other technology in the classroom. So having access to data on student device usage can help teachers specifically understand what their students are doing or aren't doing during class time, identify trends with all of that student activity, personalize learning based on student interests, and ultimately instill confidence in using technology and learning to trust their students when using that technology. Having access to that student device usage data can also help tech coaches and administrators. For tech coaches specifically, it really helps them identify opportunities for professional development. If students aren't using technology or specific tech tools, you can pretty safely assume that their teachers aren't either. On the administrator side, it's really about decision making. Data-driven decisions instead of those that are made just based on opinions or assumptions, are ultimately what you should be trying to achieve. And that student device usage data can help administrators identify what technology is or isn't being used, which then, of course, can inform their budget. I mean, overall, if you look back at this school year, it's pretty obvious that it was different in so many ways than previous years, right? I mean, between the pandemic, the introduction of remote learning, et cetera. So if nothing else, having access to student device usage data is going to help K-12 educators just look back and evaluate what happened. If nothing else, what in that crazy year, what can we glean from that data? And Kira mentioned this a bit as well in the introduction, but with Dyknow, student device usage data shows up in a few different places. And today we're going to talk specifically about these two. So first and foremost, we've got the active monitoring data. This is all the data that was tracked during a monitoring session, an active monitoring session, and it appears in the class history data, the class history section for teachers, although tech coaches and administrators can access class history data as well. And then secondly, we've got the passive monitoring data, the data that's being pulled from student devices all the time, well, at least within defined monitoring dates and times. So it's being pulled whether or not teachers are monitoring, and that's based on your active blackout settings. Um, and the device impact measurement tool specifically is what's new to Dyknow, and that feature is available for tech coaches and administrators. So over the next few minutes, we're going to take a closer look at each one of these tools, talk about how to access them, what they offer, and then after that, we'll really dive into the guts of it, which is how to use and leverage this data to make data-driven decisions that inform instruction, help optimize budgets, et cetera, et cetera. So class history first. When the Dyknow Cloud Connector gets installed onto a student device, that's what makes Dyknow able to actually communicate with that student's device and send the data back and forth. But it's not until a teacher actually clicks the Start Monitoring button that that class history data is going to be collected. So as soon as the teacher clicks Start Monitoring and up until he or she clicks the End Monitoring button, student device activity data is being collected automatically. And so each website visited, each application used by students during a monitoring session is stored in class history. And it can be accessed as long as that class actually exists in Dyknow, whether it's a current class or it's been archived as a previous class. And anytime a teacher does end a monitoring session, he or she is automatically redirected to that class history feature to review the monitored student device activity history for that class. So we're really trying to encourage usage. But again, teachers can access class history data anytime from their My Classes dashboard, as long as that class exists in Dyknow. For tech coaches and administrators, accessing class history data is from the admin settings portion of our software. So a tech coach or an admin will click on that purple graph icon to access the class history data for that particular class. And so for tech coaches, that's for any class within their assigned schools. For administrators, that's any class within their district. And class history data is displayed per class, but it can be filtered. You can really drill down into it, whether you go by student name, by date range, by activity type, or even by allowed versus blocked activity. You can even, let my video catch up. You can even click through on a given website to view the list of full URLs that are accessed by students. And you can go even further by clicking on one of those full URLs to go to that specific website page, so you know exactly what students were looking at. Okay, so that's the class history feature and functionality. Now let's talk about device impact measurement for tech coaches and admins. Then again, we'll jump into how to leverage all this data. So like the class history feature, device impact measurement is able to collect student device data via that cloud connector, that piece that gets installed onto the student device. But unlike the class history feature, device impact measurement is collecting data from student devices during school hours, so even outside of monitoring sessions, which means that anytime monitoring is enabled, and again, that's determined by your blackout settings in your account, Dyknow is collecting device impact measurement data. Whether teachers are monitoring or not doesn't really matter. But device impact measurement only displays data for those that have the student user role in Dyknow. So it's not like you can view teacher usage data on here. And then organizes all of this data, the device, app, and website activity into a nice, individual dashboard, and provides a bunch of other metrics as well that are easy to review at a glance. Tech coaches and admins that do have access to this can access this feature via that top button in their navigation menu. Again, tech coaches will be able to view device impact measurement data for the school or schools to which they're assigned. That same thing was true with class history. And administrators will be able to view device impact measurement data for any individual school within their district or all schools within the district. By default, the data here is being displayed week over week, but you can also use the report filter to access different reporting timeframes, month over month, et cetera. And then that final filter you'll see there is for specific activities. So also like the class history feature, device impact measurement allows you to drill into specific activities. And since the data here is aggregated by school, you'll not only be able to see which schools visited which websites, but you can go even further and see which of those students within those schools viewed those particular websites as well. Okay, so now that we've covered what Dyknow offers in terms of student device usage, let's talk about leveraging all of this great data. As I mentioned at the beginning, student device usage data at a minimum can inform instruction, enhance decision making, et cetera. Without analyzing student data, it's way too easy to make decisions based on opinions, on assumptions, who is going to speak loudest in the room, et cetera. So how do you do this? How can teachers use Dyknow class history specifically to inform instruction, personalize learning, and gain confidence using technology in the classroom? I first and foremost recommend starting with one class or one subject at a time. And keep in mind that evaluating data for a single class session is likely going to be a lot different than looking at summative data, for a whole month or an entire semester. When you're reviewing data for a single session, first, I recommend looking at the websites that were directly involved in it, or looking for the websites that were directly involved in your instruction. Those are the websites that should be listed within the most popular, right? You should see them at the top of that list in your class history page. And students should be spending the majority of that class time on those websites. If they were, great. That's a good sign that they understood the topic enough to at least stay focused and engaged in the right resources. But on the other hand, if they spent less than the expected amount of time on those 4 websites, you definitely want to ask yourself why. Was it that the material was too complex for them to stay engaged? Maybe it was just too simple or too easy that they were able to move on more quickly than expected. Or maybe it was just presented in somewhat of a boring way. You might not actually have the answer to this question right away, but at least you've got enough data to take pause and reevaluate. You might consider a different approach next class time on that same topic and see if you get different, better results. And I want to point out here too that while the most popular activity is where you might start your evaluation of class history data, I definitely believe it's just as important to look at all the other websites as well. Like specifically, there's an other category in that list. So that other section, in my opinion, is a great way to find new resources. And I want to share an example here. I once heard of a Dyknow teacher that said she discovered Khan Academy through class history data. So I believe Khan Academy is a free resource, but she had never heard of it at the time. And she saw that students were using it here and there. So when she followed up with those students, she actually had some of them admit that they felt like they just needed a little bit more help on something, but were either too shy or just too afraid to ask. So they really took upon themselves to self-serve. And now, thanks to the class history data, this teacher uses Khan Academy quite regularly in her lesson plans. And it just helped her figure out that students sometimes prefer to self-serve before they decide to ask the teacher for help. Regardless, whether a website is popular or not, right? Whether it's at the top of that list or within the other section, the websites and activities that you're seeing in the class history data should be related to instruction. If you find a website in the class history data that has absolutely nothing to do with the subject you're teaching, it's probably a good idea to update your blocking plan for the next class. If you're using a block-only blocking plan, you would simply add that website to the list of blocked websites or add that application to the list of blocked applications for that next class. But if you feel like maybe you're constantly doing that after a bit, you're constantly adding websites to that list of blocked websites, definitely consider switching to an allow only blocking plan. So those are the two main types we have in Dyknow, allow only or block only. And allow only is the more restrictive version. So it's going to save you a little bit of time, actually. You don't have to enter as many websites and the things to allow, right? Because everything else is blocked except those few websites that you want students to use. And similarly, maybe those off-task websites have only been used by a few students. So that might be a good case for you to start considering a segmented blocking plan, right? If only one or maybe just a select few students are consistently off task. Either way, the class history data here is going to help you use your blocking plans more effectively. And again, maximize that instruction time and helping keep students focused. That date history, or excuse me, that date filter is also super helpful. Because when you're looking at class history data for longer periods of time, it's much easier to identify trends. And since you're able to pull data in class history from the very beginning of school for as long as that class was active, you can pull a lot more to actually start identifying those trends. So for example, in that blocked activity section, you'll be able to see that there's a specific field for distractions defeated. And that's ultimately the number of websites or applications that students attempted to access, but were unable to because of your enforced blocking plan. Well, this specific number, that defeated distractions number, that should go down throughout the school year. It's true that it'll probably start out really high, but it really should decrease throughout the year. I've heard countless teachers say that students truly are less likely to get off task with Dyknow because of those blocking plans. I mean, eventually it's just that students get tired of getting blocked and they ultimately just stop trying. So use your blocking plans, look for trends, and make those blocking plans that much stronger and more effective, and it will pay dividends, I guarantee it. And this is another place in class history data where the data you're seeing in class history can be really effective for grading. So if you're looking at a single student's class history data for a semester, you should be able to identify trends among the allowed activity and the blocked activity sections. If the student's productivity levels have increased, you'll see those relevant, instruction related websites in the list of those that are most popular, right? They'll be at the top of that list. And if the student is getting better with digital citizenship, that number of distractions defeated, that number of blocked websites and blocked activities will have decreased. And this is also data that you should be sharing with students and with their parents. I really, really recommend opening up those lines of communication on this class history data. It can be super helpful. It's true that one of the most effective influences on student behavior is understanding perception versus reality. And it's hard to argue with data. So if a student seems maybe unaware, or at least claims they're unaware of how they're spending their class time, share their class history data with them. Just try it. Discussing how that data might actually be affecting their work and therefore impacting their grades is a very direct but pretty effective way to get feedback. It always reminds me of, a personal example here. It always reminds me of my iPhone and how every week I get an update about how much screen time I've had. Usually it still shocks me to see how long I still spend staring at my phone screen, but I do get really excited when that number goes down. And the same should apply to your students and their on task versus off task behavior. Seeing that data can be believing it. So if you see that the number is going down, that incentivizes them to continue doing that and continue to work on their grades. And then similarly, at a parent teacher conference, use this class history data to highlight that student's great work and all the resources that they might be using during class time, kind of like a show and tell with the parents. You're using the data then as a very objective measurement to show the student's growth. And then finally, just as you can use class history data to open up communication with a student, you can also use it to encourage communication among your students and to personalize learning for them. And for this example, I want to share a story that I heard from our customers at Richland 2 in South Carolina. It was during one of their back to school conferences a couple years ago, and a teacher shared a story about a shy student that really just wasn't engaging much in class, and much less with other students. Well, after a while, the teacher noticed that in the class history data for this student, he would, when he had free time, spend it on activities related to anime. So ultimately, the teacher took it upon herself and found a way to make the next project, or maybe it was a game. I forget specifically the story, but either way, that next part of class, she tried to incorporate anime as the topic in hopes of encouraging that student to open up a bit. By spending time on something that was specifically related to something that this student already enjoyed. So therefore something he's more likely to talk about, right? Because he knows a lot about it. So all of these things I just mentioned are always, for a teacher to take advantage of student device usage data. But there is one final benefit I want to share, and that's about, building confidence with technology. The class history data can help teachers, whether you're tech savvy or not, build confidence using technology in the classroom. Technology isn't going anywhere, right? That's no secret. So I encourage teachers out there that are using Dyknow to use it to learn how to trust using technology in the classroom and trust their students that are using technology. Because Dyknow class history should be bringing you a little bit of peace of mind. It acts as a paper trail. So all of that student device activity that happened during a monitoring session, you can access later. So ideally, you should feel comfortable just starting a monitoring session and then ignoring Dyknow altogether. Use the class time to focus on your students, right? They're the most important because you're not going to miss anything. Dyknow class history data has your back. We're providing documentation for everything that happened on those student devices during class. So, focus on teaching instead of worrying about incorporating technology into the classroom, and you'll get more comfortable so much more quickly than you probably realize. So now let's talk about leveraging device impact measurement data for tech coaches and for admins. How can tech coaches and admins use device impact measurement data to identify professional development opportunities, support good decision making, optimize budgets, etc.? This new module within Dyknow enables tech coaches and admins to really measure how school issued devices and technology are being used. And since the reporting is designed in a week over week and month over month format, identifying trends is that much easier. Right away, you'll be able to see whether devices are being used at certain schools within your district more than others. If students are being monitored more often at certain schools than others, and if some schools are using Microsoft Teams, for example, more often than Zoom, etc. So let's say, for example, that your school or your district is paying for a certain tech tool. Surely they pay for tons of these. Well, that tool then should be appearing in the device impact measurement list of top 100 websites on a weekly or a monthly basis. If it is, that's a good sign you're getting your money's worth. But if it's not, I definitely recommend taking a closer look. Are there specific schools that aren't using this tech tool as much as others, or maybe not at all? If so, why? Maybe those teachers need a refresher on how to use it. Maybe there's a tech issue going on that your IT team should investigate. Either way, it's a good red flag. Either way, those activities should start trending up after you've taken action on them. And whether that means that you've encouraged more professional development specifically on that, or maybe it was a tech issue, after you take action, you should see that trending number going up. And similarly, if you're consistently seeing off-task websites being used by students in a certain grade level, there are a few opportunities for follow-up. First, you might consider some additional professional development for those teachers specifically. Second, you might consider creating or enhancing an existing school-wide blocking plan in Dyknow, just to help give a little extra help for those teachers to keep students on task. And third, you can drill down to see which individual students access those websites. If the website was inappropriate, not just off task, it was inappropriate, you might want to have a conversation with that student, and you might consider adding that website to your content filter to restrict it for all students. And remember, since the device impact measurement data might be showing student activity history that happened outside of class, the teacher may not be able to catch those kinds of things. So it is equally important to focus on off-task websites, again, for follow-up, for adding to your content filter, et cetera. The teacher may not have had the opportunity to catch that. And finally, admins and tech coaches can use device impact measurement data to optimize budgets. Again, it's no secret that technology is expensive, and schools certainly are made of money. But really, the problem with all of those tech tools is that they don't actually provide data on how much they're being used. So if you're not seeing tech tools that you pay for show up consistently in the top 100 websites or top 100 applications sections within the device impact measurement, um, and especially if additional professional development isn't successful in encouraging more usage, it might be time to consider removing that tool from the budget altogether and saving your school cash that could probably be put to pretty good use elsewhere instead. Another example I have is, trials for new technology. It's pretty common that schools will do a trial of technology before buying it. And I know that even those that are evaluating Dyknow often will compare us to another software at the same time. So they have teachers try one of two softwares side by side to do a comparison before they decide which one to purchase. So if you're doing something like that, you're probably also going to survey those teachers to ask specifically for feedback. Again, in order to get a good idea of which one you want to purchase. But I definitely recommend going even a step further and using this device impact measurement data to confirm those survey results. It might not be obvious right away either, which software of the two a teacher preferred. And what I mean by that is you might see that both of those tools show up as being used equally, for equal amounts of time in this device impact measurement data. But if you drill down into each tool, you should be able to see which specific features or which specific web pages within that larger website were being used and the extent to which they were being used at which schools. So it should give you a much better idea of how engaged teachers truly were with one or both of those tools during that trial. So again, then you can weigh this information against their survey responses and have a much more data-driven decision for which tool you want to go forward and spend money on. So in summary, device impact measurement has a lot to offer. And just like class history, it can and should be supporting data-driven decisions throughout your district. And while this device impact measurement feature is new, so you're only going to have so many months worth of data from this year, just imagine what you can do with it next year when you do have a full year's worth of data. Oh, I've been really bad at keeping my PowerPoint up to date with my conversation. I apologize. Luckily, this will all be available to you after this session, as Tierra mentioned. So just to wrap things up, we want to know how you're using these features, especially device impact measurement, which is still so new to everyone. So if you can let us know how you're using it, we can then in turn share that with other schools. And as always, our team is here to help you use the Dyknow product to its fullest. Ask questions, please give us feedback. We are so much more than a standard troubleshooting resource, and we really do want to hear from you. So I'll wrap up now. That's all I've got for today. And I will pass it back to Tierra to see if we have time for Q&A.
Yeah, we definitely have time. Thank you so much, Casey. That was a wonderful presentation. I love all the stories that you shared there from existing customers and Dyknow users. If anyone has questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. We'll leave maybe a minute or so for you all to submit questions if you have them. We also received a bunch of questions ahead of registration, more related to support and Dyknow specifically. So we will follow up individually with everyone who submitted more of a support related question via email directly. So you'll get a response to those questions either today or beginning of next week. And after the holiday weekend, it doesn't look like anyone has any questions. So I'm going to assume that Casey's presentation was very thorough. And if you have any questions after the event that come up once we've closed this out, feel free to email Casey directly, support@dyknow.com, or myself directly. And we're happy to answer those questions for you and help you use your class history and DIM analytics a bit better and help you get that data in your school. Once again, if you're not a current Dyknow user, feel free to reach out to us if you're interested in getting started with Dyknow, and if you're looking for a classroom management device monitoring solution, and we're happy to get you started with a free trial or give you a full demo of the product. Once again, thank you all for joining us today for this presentation. Casey, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. We will have our next Dyknow Lunch and Learn on the last Friday in June, and that will be on a new feature that's going to be released during the back to school season, which is really exciting. So registration will open for that early next week. Go ahead and get registered for that if you can, and we hope to see you all there. Thank you all for joining us and have a wonderful holiday weekend.